Oh, so welcome back. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, I should say. My name is John Cleere. I'm hosting Creating Design and Tech Stage here today. And so my role in Red Lemonade is to convert business strategy into a designed, actionable, problem-solving process. And if that doesn't sound like jargon to you, well, glad you come to the right place, so we'll kick off really. So just to introduce our panel, we have Stephen, Matthew, and we have Mark. And Stephen, Matthew, Mark, and John. Sounds like the apostles or something like that. I'll just ask them all to just introduce themselves. So Stephen, just tell us a little bit about your company and what you do.
Sure. I work for Fjord, which is it's a global design agency, but I work within the DOC, that's a multidisciplinary research and innovation hub for Accenture based in Dublin. So we work on a wide variety of projects, including emerging technologies, including looking at organizational transformation, and it's got quite a research focus.
Yeah, so my name is Mark Swaine, so I've been working in product and UX for probably 15, 17 years or so. I mentor a lot of startups across a lot of incubators. I've been leading product design in a lot of banks in North America, Canada, back home in Ireland. I'm doing a lot of lecturing and mentoring with my own initiatives for UXinstitute.com, which I'm kicking off shortly, and I'm also helping a lot of mature Series A around upward companies set direction, North Star, and roadmap for their product line. I'm trying to really help them build design teams internally.
Hi guys, my name is Matthew. I'm the head of UX at Travelport. They're a global distribution system in the travel industry. One of those companies that you'll have used but never have known it. So what they do is they aggregate, normalize, and distribute content for online travel agents like Booking.com and Expedia, travel management, big travel agencies that work in corporates. And I lead and manage the team there based in Dublin, Denver, Barcelona, and some of those places. So it's an international team there. It's a multinational team.
Right, okay. So it's jargon busting, so what we'll do is we'll just start picking out some of these jargon words, and we'll get individually some of the people our guests I should say, to explain what these words mean. And if someone disagreed with them, we'll let us know as well, you know? So I'm just going to bring up some of those words. Could you move on to just one slide? If you want, sorry. Great, so I think, Stephen, I'll start with you. Design and AI, if you could go through that for me there, please. What is it?
Sure. So I'm sure a lot of people in this room would have used Netflix recently for recommendations on programs to watch, or to check their photo album on their phone. So AI surrounds us every day. It's in production in 80% of large global organizations currently. So I can give a brief introduction to what AI is, and how it's disrupting technologies, and how we're learning design for it at the DOC. So Merriam-Webster defined AI as the ability to imitate intelligent human behavior. It's also an umbrella term, so it covers computer vision, for example. It covers machine learning and natural language processing. But it's that ability to imitate intelligent behavior which is influencing our behaviors. It's redefining business strategies, and it's disrupting industries. One good example of this is in the automotive industry, where AI is being used to create self-driving cars, which is seen as a game changer within the industry going forward. But this pace of change, however, results in a lot of clients feeling under pressure to use AI without fully understanding how it might benefit their business. Kevin Kelly from IDEO described this when he mentioned that we are morphing so fast that the pace at which we create new things is faster than how we can civilize them. So at the DOC, we're looking at a number of different projects to gain an understanding around AI and how they can create better experiences for humans. One would be, we're working with, it's for the future of software application security. And while this is a high potential area for Accenture, there's one challenge that the workflows, they're very manual, they're very time intensive at the moment. So we're conducting research, looking at how we can use AI to streamline these processes, to create more accuracy and speed at which they can be done. And so while AI, it can help to enhance human capabilities, it can help to empower complex systems, and it can also help to envision new strategies. I would call out a note of caution on that, in that it has limitations. It requires significant training for AI models to ensure that they avoid bias.
Avoid bias, okay. Yeah, so like Robocop or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, we'll move on to another one. We'll pick another one. Matthew, actually, could I hit you with maybe design sprints, but maybe also design thinking? I don't know if you want to differentiate between them.
Yeah, they're not really connected,
Okay.
but we'll do design sprints.
Right.
Maybe first. Some of you will have heard that bandied around as let's do a design sprint, and depending on who you talk to, they'll have different interpretations of what that is. It kind of comes from a book that came out of Google, a guy called Jake Knapp. It's a methodology used in Google for getting a week-long session where you get stakeholders, subject matter experts, designers, tech people in a room together for a week with the focus on tackling a particular problem in a really intensive way. And what's really important is that you test that. You build a prototype and you test that, you get feedback. You close the cycle in 1 week. You take an idea, you refine it, you iterate it, you build a product, you test it, and you iterate it within that week. And you hear a lot of companies talking about design sprints that are multi-week long or they're 2 days long. It's just get designers in the room, let's have a design sprint. And it kind of loses the whole point because you're supposed to be getting feedback really quick on your product. The whole point is it's an intensely short period of time where you get feedback in 1 week. And it gets mixed up sometimes with a term called design spikes, which are really an agile term.
Okay.
So it's a specific discovery methodology. It's a week long, and if you're going to do one, I'd really recommend the book because there is a way to do them.
It's a manual, isn't it?
It's a manual, exactly. There's a way to do them, there's a way not to do them. Anything else really is kind of you can make them shorter, make them 4 days sometimes, but if they take more than a week or they take less than 4 days, and if you're not testing a prototype with real people,
What's the point?
What's the point? It's just a long meeting.
Yeah, and do you, for yourself, do you do the 4 day or the 5 day?
We do the 5 days. So
we
did one recently.
Okay.
And there are a few arguments about how you can hack them and make them shorter. Because getting 5 days of people's time is really hard.
Okay.
But there's a way you can make them work for your organisation. But you've got to build something and test it with real people and incorporate that feedback. That's the entire point.
Okay, so we'll separate. We won't mention design thinking for a moment. That's completely separate. Sprints. So Mark, we'll move on to you, and I think what would be maybe an interesting one is MVP and POC. I know MVP, but POC.
Yeah, I put that kind of in there for fun because I guess it's one of the most misinterpreted, misused acronyms in how we're building prototypes or attempting to test. So if you go into any startup or org, when you're trying to push a prototype or get them to work this way, as Matthew was saying, their interpretation of what that should be is different every time. To some people it could be a sketch on a napkin, there's my MVP.
Well, minimum viable product.
Yeah, minimum viable product, right? So what does that mean? To some people it's a full-blown coded prototype that displays the actual 3 primary features or pieces of experience that you're trying to test that's actually coded end to end, so it's not throwaway, it's reusable, I can build off it after a test. So it's something that's quite sporadic that way. I personally go to coded route, that's what I define an MVP as.
I would say that again.
So I go to coded route.
Okay.
So an MVP for me, I've found jumping into InVision and creating static prototypes, I try and stay away from as much of that crap as possible.
Right.
So I find the most efficient way to do things today, I jump into a coded prototype straight away, so that we build off it and don't throw away. And it's much more efficient for testing. So if I have 2 or 3 primary experiences or the core proposition of the product that I'm really trying to test out, that's how I'll do it.
Okay. That's very interesting, actually.
Yeah.
I think Stephen, we'll come back to you. I might mention Robocop there, but ethical design, could you give us a little bit, I suppose that leads on from AI.
Sure. So again, data has been in the news quite a lot recently. I'm sure a lot of people would have heard of the Cambridge Analytica scandal last year, where there was personal data from millions of Facebook profiles was harvested without people's consent, and it was used for political advertising. So the impact of a number of those similar cases has been to cause concern among people around how their data is being misused by organisations. there have been a number of changes recently in industry around this to give more transparency and control to people on their data. One example would be the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, which came in last year. And what that does is it makes organizations accountable for every step along the data collection process. And also there's another initiative called ITP, or Intelligent Tracking Prevention, which it blocks the use of cookies which can track people's online behavior. So what these changes are doing is they're empowering people, and also reshaping customer expectations. So trust is becoming an increasingly important currency for organizations. There was a recent study done by IBM which they called out, I think it was 75% of people would not buy a product from a company if they did not trust that they would use their data in a responsible manner, if they could not trust them to protect it. So with these kind of changes, organizations need to evolve, and we're looking at new growth opportunities for them. One initiative we're working on in the doc is looking at ethical algorithms, and so you can think of a use case for that. For example, if somebody was applying for a mortgage from a bank, so how the bank could ensure that the algorithms are accurate and they're fair in terms of how they make decisions. There's another initiative called Conscientious Innovation Framework, and that encourages organizations to look at their offerings from a broader perspective. So how do they create value for society? What might the unintended consequences be, which they maybe haven't thought about up to this point? So we're looking to help guide organizations to identify new metrics, for example, trustability scores, and to create strategies based on trust and transparency in the future.
And is those algorithms, do they exist on those kind of ethical levels for mortgages and things like already, or are you kind of in that research stage of what if then this?
We're to follow up on a term that Mark used. We've created a minimum viable version of that. But it is currently being tested with clients. So it's a working prototype being tested with financial organisations. But that will need to go through a number of stages of iteration to make sure that the model is learning, to make sure that the results are as expected, before that it's put into any full production.
Who are they, Stephen?
And it's a global financial services organisation. Yeah.
Okay, great. Right, let's pick another one. Yeah, well, let's go back to design thinking then. Matthew, that one, yeah.
Yeah, it's a term I used to hate.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of designers really have problems with the term.
Yeah.
Because
it's not cool now, is it?
It's sort of.
It's just I think it was kind of like when they came out in the Harvard Review, it was kind of it was cool, and then when all the suits were using it, then it wasn't cool.
Exactly.
But now it's after finding its feet again.
It's fun. Yeah, it kind of became popular about 10 years ago when Tim Brown, he was the CEO of IDEO, and Jared Spillick tells a really funny story about how he kind of was trying to sell design to the C-suite, and he kind of, when I just talk about design with these execs, they'll just think, they'll have their preconception of design. It's an aesthetics, it's about visuals, it's a really surface, superficial thing.
Lipstick on the pig.
Lipstick on the pig, exactly. And what he realised was that I've got to use a different word, different concept to sell this idea to them, which was design thinking. So we invented a new phrase, a new kind of framing of the design process, which is about aligning business viability, technical feasibility, and customer desirability, which are really old ideas around how you design something, and how you solve a problem. And what he ended up doing was kind of popularizing design, which was always required thinking with this executive level. And it became a lot of the large agencies, the Deloittes, the Capgeminis, the IBMs of the world kind of seized upon this, and suddenly they're all. I mean, IBM tried to own it a few years ago. They were really heavily marketing design thinking as their idea, as something they'd come up with. But I mean, they were doing design for a long time. I don't know what your opinion of IBM is, but there's lots of big companies out there pushing design thinking as a way of working. Really, I think the best definition of it is it's adopting methodologies from traditional design processes like architecture and industrial design, and applying them to non-traditional industries like software. So what was kind of key was that, like in software and tech, they never had design process, and incorporating design, like things like collaborative design, building prototypes, human-centered testing prototypes with people. These were all novel concepts in software 20 years ago, but they weren't new in industrial design. Like if you're designing a car, you would never release a car without ever having tested with a user. You know, you'd have a lot of recalls and a lot of dead bodies. Whereas software, it's nothing. It's tech companies will think nothing of delivering, shipping software that's never been tested. And that changed about 10, 20 years. It really started to change 10 years ago. It was already being incorporated widely 20 years ago. And was kind of a new idea 30 years ago.
And is it kind of like, where when you spoke about design thinking, you were saying it's like the Jake Knapp book if someone wanted to learn about design thinking, or sprints I should say, it's like a manual. Is there anything out there in terms of design thinking that people could use to look at the steps?
I think Tim Brown's book actually is really one to start on. There's lots, if you just Google design thinking, you'll see that Venn diagram. It's really famous now where you've got...
Excellent.
It's a Venn diagram, business feasibility, business viability, technical feasibility, and customer desirability.
Right.
And when you have to have that, even what's his name, the guy who wrote Marty Kagan's book, Inspired, talks about getting representatives from those three groups at the start of the process, which is just doing design thinking. You're doing design thinking by doing that. It's so it's so embedded now. I think it's now stop being totally uncool, and it's just like accepted.
I think it's getting on with it now.
And I think that's where it's really important as a word, because it's got design accepted at the C-suite level. Whereas I think that's probably the biggest service it's done for people like design. Because one person in the last session asked a question, how do you get execs to buy into design? What's really hard if they don't want to.
Yeah, that's it.
You're almost wasting time. So it's done us a service, I think.
Right, we'll try another one. Mark, you might hit design systems. Give us a...
Sure. I guess at a very high level, it's about developing a design language for your product or organization, an actual language, but in there lies layers of trouble, I guess, to even get something like that started in an org. A good example is a company I'm helping right now, very, very successful, large enterprise product, kind of Frankenstein state of bloat that they've got into, right? So over 9-10 years, there isn't a designer in the company, and they're about 120 plus at the moment. They got about 50 million investment, and I'm kind of scratching my head going, how did this get here, right? But this is really common, this is everywhere. The point I'm getting to is that they don't have a design language. Design was never part of their thinking ever. Right, they spoke to a lot of customers and worked with a lot of customers and added and bolted on features every week because that said customer type wanted it. So I'm kind of helping them clean up shop a bit to create a language, a system that's built off a particular framework like Vue.js or Angular that we're going to bake in across. They probably have about, in terms of the suite, 8-9 products right now, and so we now need to marry in a look and feel right down to typical paradigms, interaction models, patterns that are going to be obvious and common both from a progressive web app type product right through to native. So we need to marry and nudge a lot of the interaction flows there that cross all the product streams, so the products actually feel like they come from the same company.
Right,
okay, so they don't have that right now. I mean, this is really high level stuff I'm saying here. It's way deeper than what I'm talking about, right down to words, language, acronyms, whatever it is. There's a whole piece there. And it's an ever-evolving process that's owned by a design team in an org like that. It should be a coded piece of work, not a PDF that is livable online, where developers can go in and copy and paste all the CSS from screen layouts and whatever it might be. It's a ton of work, but it's really, really needed and valuable because it's all those experiences that are baked out in the style guide that are applied cross-product, that people start to get familiar to the unique interactions, look and feel, and how to use all of that said company's product.
Grab components from different areas.
Yeah, all objects, components from primary to tertiary button styles, typography, input arrays, input fields, forms, right down to wording, language, spacing. I mean, it goes on and on and on, right? So all this should be this ecosystem.
This ecosystem, is there any particular software you use to contain all of that? right?
Yeah,
That works quite well.
sure. Like, I mean, the typical stuff people are using today, like Figma and Sketch and
Keep it all there.
tools like that to build it all in there. However, you know, we combine that with tools like Zeppelin to
Zeppelin, explain what that does after that.
correct. Yeah, to build it out from there and to actually the ideal state is if you look at an Airbnb or Salesforce Lightning design system or even IBM's design system,
Right.
you'll see how they're really pulling that together as an actual full bloated tool online. That you can reference for any component you use it this way on this screen natively versus web app, blah blah blah. Yeah, so there's a lot in there. It's a ton of work.
Ton of work.
Ton of work. Yeah, but it's good.
Good, okay.
Yeah.
Stephen, we might try designed, personalised experiences.
Sure. So I'll give one example of this. So it's coming up to summer. A lot of people might be thinking about, say, holidays or booking getaways over the summer. But increasingly, people are having experiences. So when they're, for example, that example of a holiday, when they book a holiday, they find they might get recommendations for the exact same holiday after they've booked and taken the holiday, or you might buy a product online, and then you get targeted for the exact same product which you already have.
After I've had my holiday,
Exactly. So, the background there is rather than organisations learning from customer behaviour in terms of their preferences, they're just retargeting. They're just pushing back out the same offers. And there's an interesting discussion going on in industry at the moment around personalisation and around how brands can remain relevant for consumers with their changing expectations. We worked on a recent project with a global cosmetics agency to understand how what their current understanding is of their customers and how they can provide better service and experiences for them going forward. And the challenge that we've found is there's two main areas. So one is a technology challenge, where a lot of these organizations have multiple legacy systems, and they find it difficult to combine the data from all of those systems to create a single view of their customer. Because having that holistic view is key to be able to understand what their actions are at each touch point along the customer journey, and then how to be able to predict of what would likely create value for them in the future.
Yeah.
A second piece, so once those organisations have done that kind of tactical work, once they've integrated all of that data, would be the understanding of consumer behaviour. And I know we mentioned earlier around, say, GDPR and those new industry regulations that have come in, but research shows that the majority of consumers are happy to share their data as long as there's a clear value given to them in return from the brands. But there's also a growing group of people who are looking to disconnect from the daily amount of adverts, of notifications, of content that's constantly being pushed at them. And as designers, it's important that we're mindful of those changing expectations of consumers, that we design in a responsible way for them, to ensure that we're meeting their expectations. And Fjord, we're not the only people who are looking at this. There was in the Global Mental Health Summit for 2018. There was one of the key discussions was around how they can address the impact of digital technologies on people's behaviours, and that is having a serious negative impact at the moment. So it's an interesting discussion point at the moment in industry.
I think it's with cars as well, isn't it? Like when you buy a car, you drive it out the forecourts, and that's the last you see of them. So that personal experience is not there. But when we go into like the cars that are electric and all connected to a cloud, there's much more touch points now. Experience can be brought back in and serve them better.
Absolutely, it's looking at the entire end-to-end service rather than just individual touch points along the way. So.
Yeah. Okay. Matthew, let's try design integration.
Sure, it's probably a bit of jargon maybe a lot of people haven't heard.
Right.
So maybe we'll go away with a better understanding of what that is, because it's something that has to happen. And there is a word for it. The word is design integration. It's really how you engineer the processes of design into your business. A lot of people hire design, a lot of companies, especially smaller startups, like they hire designers in and they leave the integration of design into their operations up to chance. You know? they hope the designer will figure it out, or they hope maybe the designer's manager will figure it out. And that's really, not acknowledging that, design is an end-to-end process. And that means designers to work with everything from sales, product management, marketing, engineering, QA, and from the software business, that it's an end-to-end process, and there's integration points of that process with all those different stakeholders. So for instance, with product management, it could be doing customer visits, like Paddy was talking about. It might be building in prototypes. It might be working with product management and ideation. It might be running a good design sprint. So obviously the relationship with product management is pretty well established with design. But then when it comes to that's the discovery type work. When it comes to delivery, design sometimes, maybe some companies might be involved only at the end of the development cycle. So they're given a product's already been kind of designed by the development team and product management, and they're putting the lipstick on the pig, so to speak. That's really a really bad sign. The design process, design's not integrated into the business properly. So in terms of engineering, it's how do you work in the delivery phase as well? It's like working with the team to refine and groom the stories in the backlog. Working with QA to do what we call design QA in Travelport, which is like making sure that what's being built by the team is up to the standard that the designer specified and the customer or the product management is expecting. So it's completely end to end, and it requires a lot of support. I think that's the key thing. If you own your own business, it's to think about how are you supporting designers to be successful in the business, because it's quite a new function for a lot of tech companies. A lot of people don't understand. They have preconceptions of what designers do. Like we understand that researchers do research, and engineers build software. Designers, what's their job? It seems to be can be quite confusing, especially UX designers, which is such a nebulous term for some people. So it's just you need to. Design integration doesn't happen without collaboration with all those different representatives from engineering, QA, and product. And if the designer's left to make all those connections themselves, it can make for a kind of a very fitful process where it might be skewing towards delivery or skewing towards discovery and not following through delivery. I've seen it as common for design teams to get frustrated despite doing good discovery work to see what gets built as garbage, or work on something really polished with a team and discover it has no audience because the discovery work was all done before the designer was involved. And a bunch of researchers and innovation strategists came in and told them we're going to build this, and maybe they didn't actually think about the user. So it's just how you integrate design into your business or your enterprise.
That reminds me a little bit, Hacking Growth by Sean Ellis.
I haven't read that one.
Yeah, what he just talks about is that where, you're talking about where you bring design into the different funnel or different parts of the team, but he talks about when you're in that discovery phase, or if you're working on part of retention or whatever it might be, you actually bring all the team together, someone from each of the different teams. So someone in marketing or telecom can actually find a solution to design that they don't think of. So the integration works really, really well. It's not utilised enough of it.
And that's very much actually one of the things that design sprints can help with it, because it's about getting all those stakeholders in the room to get a shared understanding of what the problem is, and actually get the best ideas from everyone and choose the best solutions, not because the designer came up with it, because everyone agrees that's the best solutions. We all understand the problem. We all have the same view of the problem. The analogy of different teams feeling the elephant is pretty common, where everyone thinks they understand the solution because they're feeling an elephant in the dark. But the team, all the different stakeholders need to come together as early as possible to understand the problem and solve it together. It's kind of they follow it through to the end.
Well, Mark, I might hit you with this one. It's not on the board, but it's just something that Matt just said. What's the difference between UX and UI? And is there a difference? And is it just subjective?
God. So in our industry, unfortunately, we're labelled and hammered with these silly acronyms around our roles that are just bolted on. Like UX design, even on its own as a term, is so wrong in my head.
Right.
Yet everyone is trying to hire a UX designer, but they don't really know what they're hiring. Right. So what I mean by that is that UX is not about design. UX is about validation of a proposition of whether a product or function or feature should function in a particular way, and that's actually true. We'll then design it much better. Design will come a little bit better after. So really research is about the qual and the quant coming together to validate that proposition. For me, design shouldn't be in the term with UX. So
we're trying to get rid of the title UX out of our business now.
You find it difficult if you're trying to hire them.
That's the problem, because it's so prevalent in the industry.
Yeah.
Like there's a Jared Smithson place, everyone's responsible for the user experience. Development, engineering, DevOps, QA, product management, everyone's responsible. And if you identify someone in the team who's responsible for designing it, you're kind of abdicating everyone else's responsibility. So his advice is get rid of anyone with the title UX in their team, because it just creates this expectation it's someone's job to do that. In fact, it's everyone's responsibility.
And we found a similar challenge as well. We almost did a cull last year of a lot of those job titles, which we felt were getting a bit outdated. Or, for example, if people apply for those roles, they might have different expectations to the how the experience actually working in that role. So it's a case of, with technologies changing fast, and the needs of designers evolving all the time, that UX is becoming outdated at this point.
So it's not cool anymore then, yeah? Okay. Because I think a lot of roles are changing in terms of we don't know what the roles will be coming up, so they'll exist for design as well. I was going to ask, just said something there that we haven't hit at all, or I barely mentioned, was retention. So Mark, if you just give me an idea of what retention is.
Sure. I guess the retention piece of any product or developing a strategy, acquisition today is cheap and quick.
Yeah.
Right? It's getting cheaper and cheaper and quicker. If you look at B2B SaaS as a pivotal model, to get them in for a demo for 2 weeks, 4 weeks before you try and convert. Acquisition is out and retention's in, and that whole retention life cycle, after a first touch point of jumping into a dashboard and starting to use a tool and identifying how it's going to benefit them to start to change their workflow or behaviors that way. From there on in, up to that brand, it's the brand's responsibility to figure out how they're going to reduce churn and keep that user in there, what they can offer, what they can push, how they can contextually really stay relevant as a platform. We all jump into these tools. B2B SaaS is so oversaturated everywhere. We jump in straight away. 2 weeks later, we're gone, right? So that whole retention piece is about, do we kick off any email campaigns? Do we try and really identify contextually with that user how we can communicate and support them better in what they're trying to do in the tool?
Yeah.
Are we offering the right content strategy in parallel with that? And how do we upsell, cross-sell afterwards and keep them in there, right? And that's a massive piece of work. That's the gold mine for most tools and platforms. And
so early adopters, they're not necessarily adopters, and that's what you're really
not always, no. And it's a huge amount of effort that gets baked in there. But so many companies focus on the acquisition stage in the sales cycle and getting them into the platform in the first place, that they don't realize that the retention phase is where you live or die.
Yeah, we're nearly running out. I'm surprised we got through them all so fast, but I think there's one left, automated experiences.
I'll jump into a bit. I'll give a quick example. So in a platform I'm working on right now, it's an interesting one. We're trying to drum up some automated experiences for the users. And what that means is that said user is sitting behind this enterprise tool 8 hours a day is their work shift. Okay, so they're dispatching taxis from this tool, right? So this tool is a global tool, it's used all over the world. And as with any SaaS tool today, we're trying to drum up what that recommendation or prediction engine, that black box is that sits underneath, should be at the core of most tools from an ML perspective. So what does that look like as an automated experience for that user and for the different users in the arc in the organization? One is that dispatcher of taxis in the interface gets the system to recommend some small cues, education nudges to preempt delays in traffic, weather issues, whatever it might be that will delay some of the bookings in the taxi rank. So the system's able to give her or him nudges to prevent that happening. Try this route instead on the map, send the taxi driver this way. So some small, light education nudges where the system is learning over time about the behavior of the model, of how they're running their taxi rank and how it's set up. On the flip side of that then, you'll find that automated experiences from a super admin role perspective or company owner, fleet role owner perspective, they want it done in different ways. What we're learning, they want deeper, super admin dashboards with automated data churned back to them, showing where the inefficiencies are happening, giving them predictions, but also the why around that, why it's happening, so they can hit a button to enable, yes, fix this and preempt this for the next time, for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right, so there's some automated nudges, cues, educational pieces that are fed daily as the system learns how their model's working, and they're automated, hands off. Okay, so you know it's the system doing it for the user.
I mean, a simple example of that would be something like maybe Uber, where when it rains, it just lets them know that there's going to be a bigger update, and then the weather is so predictable now.
Yeah, and thus then fed, it gets back to the actual passenger. On the passenger outside, they get the nudge back also. It's automated back to them, right? You know, like that's just one example. If you look at bots or voice or anything like that, Alexa, it's all. Right, so
I think it's a really good point, because I think that combination of technologies of bringing geolocation, bringing AI that it learns over time can create really rich experiences for people, and can benefit efficiency as well. And just one other kind of layer to that is, I know when people mention automation, at times it can create fear among people, because I think there's stats around that. I think around kind of 2030 that 60% of the jobs that would exist at that time don't exist now, and a lot of people are thinking, shit, will I have a job at that time? But I think I think there's a number of different ways of looking at it, but I think viewing automation as something which can help us. So for example, if there are low value tasks, if there are ones which are undesirable, that can free people up for higher value tasks. So we can view these technologies as kind of like a teammate that we can work with, and these technologies can have individual strengths in terms of the processing power, whereas humans have the understanding of the broader context. They have the skills of empathy and so on. So I think it's the combination of those two can help to enhance kind of human performance going forward.
Until it goes wrong.
Until it goes wrong. Speaking of going wrong, we'll open it up to the audience there. So does anyone have any jargon busting terms that they'd like the panel to break up for you? Or any questions? Nobody? Okay, well that's okay. I'd like to thank Mark, Matthew, and Stephen as well. So thanks very much, guys. And